heart of Kentucky, as the 20th century dawned, the state found itself on the brink of a political revolution. The air was thick with the scent of change, a blend of hope and uncertainty that wafted through the bustling streets and quiet countryside alike. Kentucky, a land rich in history and tradition, stood at a crossroads, its future shaped by the hands of those bold enough to steer its course. As the state prepared for a pivotal election, whispers of discontent rustled through the political underbrush. The current governor, a man of charisma and controversy, had led Kentucky through turbulent times. Under his watch, the state had seen both progress and strife, leaving the populace divided in their opinion of his legacy. In the shadows of these achievements and failures, a new breed of politicians emerged, hungry for power and influence. Their ambitions were as diverse as the rolling hills of the bluegrass region, each harboring their own vision for Kentucky's future. Among them was a figure who stood out for his eloquent speeches and grand promises, capturing the hearts and minds of many. This politician, whose name was on the lips of every voter, was widely expected to be the state's next governor. Yet, beneath the veneer of political campaigns and public appearances, there were murmurings of something more sinister. Rumors of corruption, backdoor deals, and betrayal circulated in hushed tones. These rumors reached the ears of a journalist, a keen observer of human nature and the intricacies of political power. Unbeknownst to the public, this journalist would soon find themselves entangled in a web of intrigue that would shake the foundations of Kentucky's political landscape. As the election drew near, the stakes grew ever higher, and the lines between friend and foe blurred. The journalist, driven by a relentless pursuit of truth, stood ready to peel back the layers of deceit and expose the raw underbelly of Kentucky politics. Little did they know, their quest would lead to an event so shocking, so unforeseen, that it would echo through the annals of history. The assassination of a politician on the brink of power, a murder that would unearth a story of ambition and betrayal, forever altering the course of the state's history. Thus begins our tale, a chronicle of power, ambition, and the pursuit of truth in the early 1900s Kentucky. A story where every handshake held a hidden agenda, and every smile concealed a dagger. Welcome to Governor in the Grave. In a small cluttered office in downtown Lexington, the journalist sat hunched over a typewriter, the clacking of keys a steady rhythm in the quiet room. The walls were lined with shelves crammed with books and newspapers, chronicling years of Kentucky's history and politics. The journalist, known for their sharp intellect and unyielding search for truth, was a respected figure in the world of news, albeit one who preferred the background to the limelight. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, an anonymous letter slid through the crack under the door. It was plain and unassuming, but to the journalist, it was the whisper of a story yet untold. The letter spoke of potential corruption in the upcoming election, hinting at a conspiracy that ran deep within the political fabric of Kentucky. Intrigued, the journalists began their investigation the following day, venturing into the heart of Kentucky's political scene. They visited smoke-filled rooms where politicians gathered, overhearing conversations laced with ambition and greed. The journalists took notes, their mind piecing together the fragments of information, searching for the thread that would unravel the mystery. As the days passed, the journalist encountered subtle signs that their presence was not going unnoticed. An unfamiliar car parked outside their office, a glance too long from a stranger, an unmarked envelope left on their desk. These small incidents, seemingly inconsequential, began to paint a picture of unease. Amidst this growing tension, the journalist learned of a politician who stood out from the rest. Charismatic and articulate, this politician was rapidly gaining popularity, touted by many as the inevitable next governor. Yet, there were rumors, whispers of a past shrouded in secrecy, of alliances with powerful, unseen figures. The journalists' curiosity turned to determination. They knew that the truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of political posturing and deceit. With each step closer to uncovering the conspiracy, the air seemed to grow heavier, the shadows darker. But fear was a small price to pay in the quest for truth. As the journalists delved deeper into the murky waters of Kentucky politics, they remained unaware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. A storm that would soon engulf them in a tempest of power, betrayal, and danger. This was more than just a story, it was a journey into the heart of darkness, a test of courage and conviction. And so, the game began, a dangerous dance of cat and mouse, where every move could be the last. The journalist was ready to play, armed with nothing but a pen and an unwavering resolve to unveil the truth, no matter the cost. As the journalists delved deeper into their investigation, the political landscape of Kentucky began to reveal its darker side. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their endeavor seemed to become. The once clear lines between right and wrong, truth and deception, started to blur. The journalists' days were filled with clandestine meetings with informants who spoke in hushed tones about the upcoming election. These informants, some of whom were deeply embedded within the political system, hinted at a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of democracy in Kentucky. They spoke of a powerful cabal that wielded influence over key political figures, manipulating events from behind the scenes. Amidst these revelations, the journalist couldn't shake off the feeling of being constantly watched. Unmarked cars seemed to linger a bit too long near their home. Anonymous phone calls in the dead of night asked cryptic questions, or worse, offered veiled threats. These occurrences served as chilling reminders of the stakes involved in unearthing such a deep-rooted conspiracy. The politician tipped to be the next governor became a central figure in the journalist's investigation. Charismatic and seemingly devoted to the public good, this individual's meteoric rise in the political arena was both impressive and, under the current circumstances, suspicious. The journalist began to uncover a trail of questionable financial transactions and alliances that suggested this politician was not the reformer he claimed to be. As the election drew closer, the tension in Kentucky became palpable. Political rallies turned into fervent demonstrations of support for the various candidates, each promising to lead the state into a new era. But beneath this veneer of enthusiasm and hope, there was an undercurrent of fear and suspicion, stoked by the journalist's findings. In a risky move, the journalist decided to confront the politician directly, seeking answers to the growing list of questions. The meeting was tense, with the politician dismissing the allegations as baseless and accusing the journalist of trying to undermine the democratic process. Despite the politician's smooth reassurances, the journalist left the meeting with a sinking feeling that there was much more to the story than what was being said. The days leading up to the election were a whirlwind of activity. The journalist worked tirelessly, following leads and piecing together the puzzle. Each piece of evidence seemed to point towards a sinister plot, one that threatened to shake the very core of Kentucky's political establishment. As the journalists continued their relentless pursuit of the truth, they remained unaware of just how close they were to uncovering a secret that would change everything. A secret that someone was willing to go to great lengths to keep buried. The stage was set for a revelation that would send shockwaves through Kentucky, and the journalist was at the very heart of it. The eve of the election in Kentucky was marked by a palpable sense of anticipation and unease. The streets buzzed with the energy of final campaign rallies as candidates made their last impassioned pleas to the electorate. The journalists, however, found themselves far removed from the fervor of public politics, deep in the throes of a different kind of battle, a battle for truth. The journalists' investigation had led them down a labyrinthine path of corruption and deceit. The politician poised for victory, whose star had risen so swiftly in the Kentucky sky, was at the center of this web. Behind the charismatic facade, the journalist had uncovered a network of questionable alliances and dubious financial dealings. These findings, however, were just pieces of a larger, more complex puzzle. As the journalists delved deeper, they encountered obstacles at every turn. Key sources became suddenly reticent, documents went missing, and trails that once seemed hot grew cold. It was as if an unseen hand was erasing the breadcrumbs they were following. Despite these setbacks, the journalists' resolve only strengthened, driven by a deep-seated belief in the power of the truth. The night before the election, the journalist received an anonymous tip about a secretive meeting at a secluded location on the outskirts of Lexington. Armed with nothing but their notepad and an unwavering sense of duty, they decided to investigate. As they drove through the dark, winding roads, the weight of the situation bore down on them. This could be the breakthrough they were looking for, or it could be a trap. Arriving at the location, the journalists carefully made their way to a vantage point. Through the dim light, they observed a group of figures engaged in a heated discussion. Among them was the politician, his face etched with seriousness, a stark contrast to the charming public persona he so often displayed. Unable to hear the conversation, the journalist took careful note of the other individuals present. Some were recognizable figures in Kentucky politics, while others were unknown, their identities obscured by the shadows. The meeting seemed to be a convergence of power and influence, a gathering that hinted at the deep-rooted nature of the conspiracy the journalist was uncovering. Returning to their office, the journalist pondered the implications of what they had witnessed. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, forming a picture of a political landscape riddled with corruption and power plays. The journalist knew that exposing this would not only shake the foundations of the state's political establishment, but also put them in grave danger. On the eve of the election, as Kentucky stood on the brink of choosing its future, the journalist prepared for the most crucial and dangerous phase of their investigation. They knew that the coming days would either see the triumph of truth or the silencing of it forever. The stakes were high, and time was running out. The journalists braced themselves for the storm that was about to come. Election day dawned with a sense of foreboding in the air. The streets of Kentucky were abuzz with activity as voters queued up at polling stations, ready to cast their ballots in what was one of the most anticipated elections in the state's history. The journalist, however, was preoccupied with a deeper, more sinister plot that was unfolding beneath the surface. The day progressed with an undercurrent of tension. News reports flowed in, talking of a high voter turnout and the fervent hopes of the populace for a brighter future. Meanwhile, the journalist was reviewing their notes, piecing together the last fragments of the conspiracy puzzle. They planned to publish their findings after the election results were announced, exposing the corruption that threatened to engulf the state's political system. As evening approached and the polling stations began to close, the journalist received an urgent message. There was to be a victory rally for the favored politician, the one at the center of the suspected conspiracy. Sensing that this could be a pivotal moment, the journalist decided to attend, hoping to gather any last-minute evidence. The rally was a grand affair, held in a large public square in downtown Lexington. The crowd was a sea of excited faces, all eagerly awaiting the arrival of the politician who many believed would be the next governor. As the politician took the stage, greeted by thunderous applause, the journalists positioned themselves at the edge of the crowd, their eyes scanning the scene for anything out of the ordinary. Then, in a moment that would forever be etched in the history of Kentucky, chaos erupted. A series of gunshots rang out, slicing through the cheers and music. The crowd panicked, scattering in all directions as screams filled the air. Amidst the confusion, the journalist saw the politician collapse on the stage, surrounded by a group of frantic aides. The journalist, in a state of shock, managed to push through the crowd to get a closer look. It was undeniable the politician, the central figure in their investigation, had been assassinated. The scene was one of utter pandemonium, with law enforcement rushing in and paramedics fighting their way through the crowd. As the journalists stood there, witnessing the aftermath of this shocking event, they realized that the story they were chasing had just taken a dramatic and tragic turn. The assassination was not just a political catastrophe, it also meant the loss of a crucial piece of the puzzle they were trying to solve. In the hours that followed, the journalist grappled with a mix of emotions: grief, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. They knew that the assassination was no random act of violence, it was a calculated move, a sinister climax to the power struggle they had been uncovering. As Kentucky reeled from the assassination, the journalist understood that their investigation had just become more critical than ever. The truth behind this heinous act had to be uncovered, not just for the sake of justice, but for the future of the state. With a renewed sense of purpose, the journalist set out to unravel the mystery surrounding the assassination, unaware of the further dangers that lay ahead in their quest for the truth. In the wake of the assassination, Kentucky was plunged into a state of turmoil. The journalists, amidst the chaos, found themselves at the center of a tangled web of intrigue. The political landscape had shifted dramatically overnight, and with it, the nature of their investigation. The immediate aftermath of the assassination saw a frenzy of speculation and finger-pointing. Law enforcement agencies launched a full-scale investigation, but the journalists knew that the true story lay deeper than what the official line suggested. The connections they had uncovered during their investigation now took on a new significance. One of the first revelations in the wake of the tragedy was the involvement of a close ally of the deceased politician. This individual, who had always been in the politician's shadow, suddenly became a key figure in the unfolding drama. The journalist's sources hinted at a strained relationship between the two, marked by jealousy and rivalry. The possibility of betrayal loomed large, adding a new layer of complexity to the story. As the journalists dug deeper, they uncovered a network of corruption that extended far beyond a single politician. It was a network that spanned the state's political and business elite, a cabal that had been manipulating events for their own gain. The assassination, it seemed, was not just an act of political rivalry, but a move in a much larger game of power. The journalist faced significant challenges in unraveling this web. Key informants who had previously been forthcoming with information now turned reticent, frightened by the implications of the assassination. Documents and evidence that the journalist had been relying on mysteriously disappeared, and they found themselves under constant surveillance. Despite these obstacles, the journalist persevered, driven by a relentless pursuit of the truth. They began to piece together a narrative that pointed to a deep-seated corruption within Kentucky's political system. This corruption was not limited to individuals, it was systemic, a rot that had been festering for years. The journalist's work took on a new urgency. They knew that exposing this network of corruption was not just about solving the mystery of the assassination, it was about saving the very soul of Kentucky's democracy. The journalist worked tirelessly, often at great personal risk, to gather the evidence needed to expose the truth. Throughout this period, the journalist grappled with the moral implications of their work. They were acutely aware of the danger they were in, not just physically, but also ethically. Uncovering the truth meant tearing down the facades that many powerful people had carefully built. It meant exposing the dark underbelly of a world that many preferred to remain hidden. As the journalists continued their investigation, they realized that they were not just fighting against a cabal of corrupt individuals. They were fighting against a culture of impunity that had allowed such corruption to thrive. It was a daunting task, but one that the journalist was determined to see through to the end. The story that was emerging was one of ambition, betrayal, and a ruthless struggle for power. It was a story that would shake the foundations of Kentucky's political establishment to its core. And at the heart of it all was the journalist, armed with nothing but their pen and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The journalist's investigation into the tangled web of Kentucky's political machinations continued with unrelenting intensity. Each step deeper into the heart of the conspiracy revealed more about the complex interplay of power and deceit that characterized the state's political landscape. As the journalist pieced together the evidence, a clearer picture began to emerge. The assassination of the politician was not just a result of personal rivalry or political ambition, it was a strategic move in a larger power struggle. This struggle was not confined to the visible figures of the political arena, but extended to influential, shadowy figures who operated behind the scenes. The journalist discovered that the assassination was intricately linked to a bid for control over Kentucky's future. This was not just about who held office, it was about who controlled the levers of power, who dictated policy, and who benefited from the state's wealth. The stakes were higher than anyone outside this clandestine circle could have imagined. A key turning point in the investigation came when the journalist managed to secure a confidential document. This document, which they obtained through a risky and clandestine exchange, contained crucial information about the relationships and transactions between various political and business leaders. It outlined a network of influence and corruption, implicating several high-profile figures in the process. The deeper the journalists delved into this network, the more dangerous their situation became. They began to receive anonymous threats, warning them to stop their investigation or face dire consequences. But these threats only served to strengthen the journalists' resolve. They knew they were on the right track, and they could not turn back now. As the journalists continued their investigation, they also began to understand the personal cost of their quest for truth. Their relationship suffered, their health deteriorated, and they found themselves increasingly isolated. The burden of what they had uncovered weighed heavily on them, but they were driven by a deep-seated belief in the importance of their work. The journalists' findings painted a picture of a state caught in the grips of a power struggle that was as old as the state itself. This struggle was not just about political ideology or policy, it was about the very essence of power: who held it, how they used it, and what they were willing to do to keep it. As the journalists prepared to publish their findings, they knew they were about to shake the foundations of Kentucky's political establishment. They were about to expose a truth that many had suspected, but few had dared to confront. The revelations would challenge the public's perception of their leaders and the system that had placed them in power. The journalists understood the gravity of what they were about to do. They were not just reporting news, they were potentially altering the course of the state's history. But for them, the pursuit of truth was not just a professional obligation, it was a moral imperative. The shadows of power that had long dominated Kentucky's political landscape were about to be exposed, and the journalist was at the forefront of this historic revelation. As the journalist prepared to expose the sprawling web of corruption and power in Kentucky, they uncovered a startling revelation. A close ally of the assassinated politician, once thought to be a loyal confidant, was deeply involved in the conspiracy. This betrayal was not just a stab in the back of the deceased, it was a calculated move in a game of political chess. The ally, who had always maintained a facade of integrity and loyalty, was revealed to have harbored deep-seated ambition and resentment. Beneath the surface, this individual had been maneuvering for years, waiting for the right moment to strike and seize power. The journalist's investigation revealed a trail of deception that traced back years, showing a pattern of cunning and ruthlessness. This betrayal was a crucial piece of the puzzle. It shed light on the motivations behind the assassination and the subsequent power struggles. The murdered politician, once a rising star, had been a mere pawn in a larger game, a game where the stakes were the control of Kentucky itself. The journalist's revelation sent shockwaves through the state. The public, already reeling from the assassination, was stunned by the extent of the betrayal. It challenged their perceptions of their leaders and the political system they had trusted. As the story broke, the political landscape of Kentucky was thrown into turmoil. The close ally, once seen as a potential successor to the assassinated politician, was now a pariah, their ambitions shattered by the weight of their betrayal. But the story was bigger than just one individual. It was about a system that allowed such ambition and corruption to flourish. The journalist, despite the personal risks, continued to dig deeper. They were determined to expose the full extent of the conspiracy, to shine a light on the dark corners of Kentucky politics where corruption and ambition had taken root. Their investigation led them to uncover further evidence of collusion between business leaders and politicians, of backroom deals that had shaped policy and decision-making at the highest levels. The corruption was systemic, a cancer that had metastasized through the body politic. As the journalists published their findings, the impact was immediate and far-reaching. Calls for reform echoed through the halls of power, and investigations were launched into the activities of key figures in the conspiracy. The public demanded accountability and transparency, no longer willing to turn a blind eye to the machinations of their leaders. The journalist, once a lone voice in the wilderness, had ignited a movement for change. But the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges. The forces of corruption and power would not yield easily, and the journalist knew that the fight was far from over. Yet, in exposing the betrayal and ambition that had poisoned Kentucky's political system, the journalist had started a process of healing and renewal. It was a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of democracy, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, light could be found. The fight for a better Kentucky had just begun, and the journalist was at the forefront of this historic struggle. In the aftermath of the explosive revelations, the journalist's life became a whirlwind of activity and danger. Their expose on the deep-seated corruption within Kentucky's political elite had not only shocked the public but also angered those implicated. The journalists found themselves in a precarious position, balancing on the knife edge between heroism and peril. Despite the threats and the mounting pressure, the journalists pressed on with their investigation. They were now more than a reporter, they had become a symbol of the fight against corruption, a beacon of hope for those who yearned for a cleaner, more transparent government. The journalists' work took on a new dimension as they began to connect the dots between the assassination, the political betrayal, and the broader network of corruption. They uncovered evidence of financial embezzlement, vote manipulation, and illicit deals that extended beyond state borders. This web of deceit was not just a local issue, it had national implications, threatening the very foundations of American democracy. As they delved deeper, the journalists discovered that the roots of this conspiracy went back decades. It was a saga of power and greed, of families and dynasties that had quietly shaped Kentucky's destiny from behind closed doors. The journalists' revelations shed light on how these powerful individuals had manipulated political outcomes to their advantage, using their wealth and influence to steer the state's policies and decisions. The magnitude of the conspiracy was overwhelming, but the journalist was undeterred. They worked tirelessly, often at great personal risk, to gather the evidence needed to expose the full extent of the corruption. This quest led them into dangerous territory, both literally and figuratively. They had confrontations with shadowy figures who threatened them, break-ins at their office, and constant surveillance. Throughout this ordeal, the journalists grappled with the ethical dilemmas of their profession. They wrestled with questions about the impact of their revelations on the innocent lives entangled in the scandal, the families of those implicated, and the stability of the state. However, the need for truth and justice always prevailed, driving them forward. The journalists' relentless pursuit of the truth began to bear fruit. Their reporting led to a series of high-profile arrests and trials, shaking the political establishment to its core. Prominent figures who had once seemed untouchable were now being held accountable for their actions. As the scandal unraveled, the public's trust in the political system was severely shaken, but there was also a sense of renewal and hope. The journalists' work had initiated a cleansing process, a purging of the corrupt elements that had long plagued Kentucky's politics. The revelations also sparked a broader debate about political accountability and reform, both within Kentucky and across the nation. There were calls for stricter laws on political funding, greater transparency in government dealings, and a more robust system of checks and balances. A journalist, who had once been a lone voice in the wilderness, had started a movement that was now sweeping through the state and beyond. Their courage and determination had shown that even in the face of overwhelming power and corruption, the truth could prevail. The fight was far from over, but a new chapter in Kentucky's history had begun, one marked by a renewed commitment to integrity and justice. The climax of the journalists' investigation approached as they prepared for a final confrontation with the mastermind behind the assassination and the wider conspiracy. This shadowy figure, a person of immense power and influence, had remained elusive throughout the investigation, orchestrating events from behind the scenes. Armed with a dossier of incriminating evidence, the journalist arranged a clandestine meeting with the mastermind. The location was a secluded estate on the outskirts of Frankfurt, far from prying eyes. As the journalists drove through the winding roads leading to the estate, they were acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. This meeting could end their investigation with a definitive conclusion, or it could place them in even greater danger. Upon arrival, the journalist was led to a study where the mastermind awaited. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The mastermind, a figure who exuded both charisma and menace, greeted the journalist with a cold politeness. The journalist wasted no time, confronting the mastermind with the evidence they had gathered. They spoke of the assassination, the corruption, and the betrayal that had seeped into the heart of Kentucky's political system. The mastermind listened, their expression unreadable, as the journalist laid out the case against them. Then, in a moment of unguarded candor, the mastermind began to speak. They talked about their vision for Kentucky, a vision that they believed justified their actions. They spoke of a state crippled by weak leadership and corruption, in need of a guiding hand. In their eyes, the ends justified the means, and if that meant manipulating the political system and eliminating obstacles, so be it. The journalist listened, realizing that they were not just confronting an individual, but an ideology. This was a person who genuinely believed that their actions, however unscrupulous, were for the greater good of the state. The conversation was a chilling insight into the mindset of those who wield power from the shadows. As the meeting came to an end, the journalists knew that they had a choice to make. They could walk away, publish their findings, and let the public and the law decide the mastermind's fate. Or they could push for more, try to extract a confession, a public admission of guilt. The journalists chose the former, understanding that their role was to bring the truth to light, not to serve as judge and jury. They left the estate with a heavy heart, aware that true justice is often elusive and that the battle against corruption is never truly won. The story, when it was published, sent shockwaves through Kentucky and beyond. It was a tale of power, betrayal, and a quest for justice. The journalists' work led to a series of reforms and a renewed effort to cleanse the state's political system. The final showdown may not have brought the dramatic closure many had hoped for, but it was a pivotal moment in the fight against corruption. The journalist had exposed the dark underbelly of power, and in doing so, had sown the seeds of change. Kentucky would never be the same again, and the journalist's role in reshaping its political landscape would not be forgotten. In the aftermath of the journalist's groundbreaking revelations and the confrontation with the mastermind, Kentucky found itself at a crossroads. The political landscape had been irrevocably altered by the exposure of deep-rooted corruption and the assassination of a prominent politician. The title governor in the grave took on a symbolic meaning, representing the death of old corrupt practices and the birth of a new era in the state's politics. The journalist, having played a pivotal role in unveiling the truth, was now a figure of both admiration and controversy. Their findings had sparked a major political upheaval, leading to resignations, trials, and a public outcry for reform. The impact of their work rippled far beyond the state, prompting discussions on a national level about political integrity and accountability. Reflecting on their journey, the journalist realized the immense weight of their discoveries. They had unearthed a story of ambition and betrayal that had been hidden for years, shedding light on the darker aspects of power and politics. Their reporting had not only changed the course of Kentucky's history, but it also transformed them personally. The quest for truth had been fraught with danger and moral dilemmas, but it had also been a path to self-discovery and purpose. As Kentucky began the process of rebuilding its political system, the journalists' role in this transformation was widely recognized. They had become a symbol of the power of the press and the importance of investigative journalism in upholding democracy. The story of the governor in the grave would be remembered as a testament to the impact of relentless pursuit of truth and justice. The journalists continued their work, now more aware than ever of the complexities and responsibilities that come with their profession. They knew that the fight against corruption and the struggle for transparency were ongoing battles. But they also knew that their reporting had made a difference, that it had sparked a movement towards greater accountability and integrity in politics. The epilogue of this saga was not just the end of a chapter in Kentucky's history, it was the beginning of a new narrative. a narrative of a state striving to rise from the shadows of its past, guided by the principles of truth, justice, and democracy. The legacy of the governor in the grave would live on, not just as a story of political intrigue, but as a beacon of hope for a brighter, more honest future. As Kentucky moved forward from the tumultuous events that had unfolded, the impact of the journalist's work became increasingly evident. The state, once shrouded in the shadows of corruption and political intrigue, began to see the first rays of a new dawn. The story of the governor in the grave had not only unveiled the dark secrets of the past, but had also set the stage for a future built on greater transparency and ethical governance. The political upheaval resulting from the journalist's investigation led to a wave of reforms. New laws were enacted to ensure more stringent oversight of political financing, stricter ethical standards for public officials, and greater accountability in the electoral process. The state's political culture underwent a transformation, with a new generation of leaders emerging, committed to serving the public with integrity and honor. The journalist, having been at the heart of this historic change, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Their pursuit of truth had been a lonely and perilous path, but it had also been a profoundly fulfilling one. They had exposed the corrupt underbelly of power, challenged the status quo, and played a crucial role in shaping the future of Kentucky. The legacy of the assassinated politician also underwent a re-evaluation. Once seen as a beacon of hope and progress, their involvement in the murky world of political gamesmanship became a subject of public debate. Yet, in death, they became a symbol of the need for change, a martyr whose demise had catalyzed a movement for a better, more just political system. The journalist's story, Governor in the Grave, resonated far beyond the borders of Kentucky. It became a case study in journalism schools, a powerful example of the vital role investigative reporters play in upholding democracy. The story was a reminder that, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable power and corruption, a single individual's dedication to uncovering the truth can make a profound difference. As Kentucky continued on its path of reform and renewal, journalists looked to the future with a sense of cautious optimism. They knew that the fight against corruption was an ongoing struggle, one that required constant vigilance and commitment. But they also knew that their work had contributed to a brighter future for the state. The story of the governor in the grave ended, but its impact lived on. It stood as a testament to the courage, tenacity, and integrity of those who dared to challenge the powerful and seek the truth. In the annals of Kentucky's history, this chapter would be remembered as a turning point, a moment when the state chose to step out of the shadows and into the light.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.